Welcome back to the Painted Pages channel presenting Chapter 6 and Chapter 7 of Odyssey. Enjoy the creation of breathtaking acrylic paintings, bringing the pages of our story to life. Chapter 6. Parasites. Grocery shopping had never been one of my favorite things. I like to do it in the shortest time possible and with the smallest possible number of items. Being single had its advantages. I didn't have to cook, but I had to admit that what I ate was junk most of the time. However, Azur was with me, and I was having the time of my life. We hung out in the aisles of the store for at least half an hour. It felt so normal. I had known him for only a week, but I was myself around him. He was my other half. We were complete on so many levels, I couldn't even comprehend it. Self implies other, I thought he had said, but he was looking the other way. Did you say something? I looked up at him.
No, I didn't.
Self implies other, I repeated out loud.
You must have picked up my thoughts.
He said, surprised. You mean I read your mind?
I told you before, it is possible. Humans pick up on each other's thoughts without realizing it. Half of the things you're thinking come from others. You can't help it. The closer you get to a person, the more you're tuned into that person's thoughts. Have you never seen couples completing each other's sentences?
But I thought you spoke directly to me, that it wasn't just a thought in my mind.
Remember, Lara, I'm not just any person. Technically not just any human.
He smiled.
I may have thought a little out loud.
Self implies other? What does that mean? I asked curiously.
I was also tuned into your feelings. I'm sorry, I can't help it. I didn't mean to intrude on your privacy, but you've been broadcasting your feelings out loud to the world unconsciously. Your energy field expands when you're happy, and it shrinks when you're fearful, sad, or angry. You're very happy right now and feeling complete around me. It's mutual. I feel exactly the same way.
He said carefully. He knew I considered my feelings toward him as my weakness, and I would be uncomfortable to find out I was transparent about them unconsciously.
That is why I thought of that phrase, self implies other.
His gaze focused on mine. What does it mean? I asked again, hiding my reddened face by reaching for a pasta sauce that I didn't need and had never used before.
Do you know of Alan Watts?
When he saw my questioning eyes, he must have remembered who he was dealing with, so he kept explaining.
He made his transition from Earth some time ago. He was an advanced soul, a bright light worker in that lifetime. I was quoting one of his teachings in my mind when I overheard your thoughts on how you feel when I'm around you. It goes something like this. If you awaken from this illusion, you'll understand that black implies white, self implies other, life implies death. He is talking about duality. When you begin awakening, you start seeing how opposites actually are directly connected. I tried to explain this to you before. The universe is not a one-way street. It is complete in every way. You can't see beauty without knowing ugly. And you can't understand happiness without feeling sadness. They're two different ends of the same stick. One cannot exist without the other, and in your case, you wouldn't know what complete means without feeling loneliness. You've always felt yourself as an individual with no attachment to anyone or anything. But I have always been your other half, and we are also part of something bigger, something whole. In a broader sense, every being in the universe is part of something bigger. Humans on Earth assume they're alone, but they're never alone.
My heart expanded in my chest. I had to admit I was having a hard time understanding what exactly he meant about duality and how opposites complete each other. But I was glad for the first time in my life that I already knew what it's like to be alone, so that it would help me attract him into my life. Understanding that, and knowing he was my other half, made me happy beyond measure. I never knew grocery shopping could be so much fun, I chirped when we were heading to the cashier. Instead of acknowledging my comment, Azur directed a strange look in the cashier's direction, and before I got to see the man's face, he held my shoulders and forced me to turn around.
Would you do me a favor? I promise I'll explain it to you later.
His voice was low but urgent. What? I asked, confused.
Please leave the groceries with me. I'll take care of checking them out for you. However, I need you to step outside the store and avoid making any eye contact with the cashier. I'll join you shortly.
The concerned look on his face made me listen to him obediently. I nodded and left without question. I sat on the bench outside the store, looking anxiously at the door, waiting for Azur to come out. He finally emerged from the store with our shopping cart and sat by me. What happened?
I'm sorry. I may have overreacted, but I didn't want you to feel crabby the rest of the day. You need your energy to deal with the kids tonight.
His calm manner and vague answer puzzled me more. What happened inside? Why wasn't I supposed to look at the cashier?
You've seen the movie The Exorcist, right?
He asked casually, picking up the bags from the cart. I joined his effort, picking up the last bag for him. He knew I had seen the movie. It was more of a reminder than a question. I had watched it at a sleepover at my friend's place when I was 11, and her parents had no clue what we were up to. I could suggest my fear of darkness started after I watched that freaky thing. I don't like where this is going, I replied.
You need to face your fears. And trust me, it is not as bad as you think.
He assured me. I sighed. I know I'll be regretting this for the rest of my life, but I'll be damned if I don't want to find out what you're talking about. So go on.
Do you remember the end of the movie? It said it was based on a true story.
I wanted to cover my ears and scream, la la la, but instead, I forced myself to focus on what he was saying, and I nodded. We started walking back to my apartment.
Well, it was only a Hollywood version, of course. Those beings are not as powerful as the one in the movie, but they do take over a physical body against the owner's will, and the host doesn't realize what's happening.
I bit my lip, trying to accept his bizarre and frightening explanation. I kept walking without commenting. He must have noticed my discomfort on the subject as he stopped talking. You're kidding me, right? I finally found my voice. I still haven't recovered from my memories of that horrible movie, and you're telling me there was truth to it. You know, I'm already having trouble sleeping at night. Maybe certain things should stay unspoken. I insisted, feeling annoyed with him.
Okay, then let's change the subject. What do you want to talk about?
He asked with a frown. He was clearly disappointed in me. I was frustrated. I do want to find out why the hell you made me leave the store in such a rush, and I do want to talk about it, but I don't want you to explain it by using the scariest movie ever as an example. I felt like a 5-year-old girl complaining to her parents about the monsters under her bed. It didn't help that he held my hand while crossing the street. I knew he did it to make sure I wouldn't be run over by a car, and I waited at the crosswalk obediently until the light turned green, like a 5-year-old.
Lara, you're completely safe with me.
I know that, Azur. I was even more frustrated. But what am I going to do when you have to leave my side? You can't babysit me for the rest of your life.
You're right. I can't babysit you, and that's not my intention anyway. But I am planning on spending the rest of my life with you. Even eternity.
We had already arrived at the door of my apartment. I kept staring at his face, dazzled by his comment.
Are you going to open the door?
I searched for the key in my purse for a good 30 seconds in silence. He waited patiently until I gathered my thoughts and found the key.
Do you still want to know what happened at the store?
He asked after we had left some groceries on the kitchen counter and put away the perishable items in the fridge. Not really, but I have to. Please keep in mind that you'll be leaving my apartment within a few hours, and I'll spend the entire night with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so choose your words wisely. I headed for the living room to take a seat on the sofa. I knew it would be a long discussion.
You understand there are different dimensions, or planes, if you will, to the universe, right?
He followed me. I think I do. I shrugged.
And there are layers to each dimension, many layers.
He added, gazing at me to make sure I still understood. Well, now I know, I said, but not truly understanding the concept.
You're living in the 3rd dimension, and I'm from the 5th, and there are other beings from different dimensions. The ones I'll be talking about are mostly from the lower ones, the 2nd, and sometimes even the 3rd dimension.
I took a deep breath to gather the strength to listen to him carefully.
Sometimes, humans open portals accidentally. There were times when huge portals were opened between the Earth, and who knows what part of the universe, and millions of beings leaked into the Earth's frequency unwittingly. Even to this day, humans open portals without being aware of what they're doing.
How?
There were some events that took place throughout history. Dangerous experiments done by humans. Experiments which caused civilizations to collapse. Many of these entities leaked in through portals opened during those times. Nuclear explosions, witchboards, pendulums. If you don't know how to use them properly, the wrong intentions can open up any number of possibilities. Those beings, some of them as old as thousands and thousands of years, need to have a body in order to function in this reality. And basically they pick a host. In a way, they're like parasites. Most of them have been sent back to their reality through the centuries by strong priests or other highly capable and intuitive people. But there are still a few lingering around, even to this day.
The cashier at the store, did he have one attached to him? He nodded. Would it jump on me? Why did you make me run away? I was horrified by the thought of it.
No, it is not that easy.
He was amused by my reaction.
Your body is your shield. It guards your soul. They can only attach to you if you lose control of your body or operate at a very low vibration. Say if you're drunk, use drugs, or are very sick. And of course, there has to be one around you as well. There are not many of them anymore. The one at the store already had a host, it wouldn't jump on you.
Why then? He shrugged.
Most of them act like energy vampires. They suck your energy by looking you in the eye, and his parasite was one of them. He could have sucked all of your energy, and you wouldn't be able to recover for days.
What about you? How come you weren't affected by it?
I'm a more advanced being. It can't access me.
Am I not more advanced than that parasite? I asked in disappointment.
You are, but you don't know you are. If I have to put it in a more accurate way, you don't remember you are. Until you remember, you'd better stay away.
Wouldn't you be able to help me if I lost my energy to him? You seem to have powers.
I could, but why risk it? I didn't want you to have such an unpleasant experience even for a short time. You would have felt like all your life force was drained, miserable. I wanted to save you the feeling even if I could restore it later.
Have I ever been exposed to one? Does anybody I know have one? I asked curiously. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know, but the question was already out, and I knew he would always be honest with me.
Your ex David had one, but his was slightly different.
David, I gasped. My first exclusive boyfriend in my second year of college, David. He had a troubled past, struggling with alcoholism, drug addiction, and self-harm. All of these qualities in him must have made him a perfect host for his parasite. The scars on his arms revealed his inner pain. He had a difficult upbringing as a foster child, and emotional agony weighed heavily on him. Despite his challenges, his exceptional intelligence, particularly in quantitative subjects like math and statistics, helped him stay in college. I believed I could be there for him and help him overcome his demons. I thought I understood his suffering and hoped to guide him towards a brighter future, but instead found myself being pulled into the same darkness. I never liked smoking. I couldn't stand the smell of it, so I never picked up the habit. But I didn't mind alcohol. I started innocently even before I met David, but I was out of control after I met him. David was only 20, but he always seemed to know the right crowd to get hold of the right stuff. I was happy when I was a little tipsy and when I was next to him. I had everything I needed. Anne didn't like any of it. She often warned me against him and told me I should stay away from him, but I was only upset with her. I did believe that he loved me and wouldn't do anything to harm me. Then he introduced me to pills. I felt good when I was on the pills, but awakening to the real world was painful. I finally understood why he cut himself. Anne couldn't help me anymore. She was my roommate, but we were falling apart. She didn't want to argue with me or offend me, and every time she sensed I was going down the drain, she reminded me that no matter what happened, she would be there for me. It was only 4 months after David and I started dating. We were invited to a Halloween party. I knew the host. He was a senior, and I didn't like him much. He was from David's circle of friends. At least 15 other people were at the party, and everyone was dressed up except us. Nobody seemed to mind, though, as they were all too drunk to notice anything. I was already drunk, and I wanted more. I asked David if he had any pills. He disappeared for a second and came back with a syringe. "I've just opened the package," he said, grinning. "It's clean. I'll give you a little, and you'll be in heaven." I didn't think about the consequences of what I was about to do. I slowly handed my arm to him, but the second I felt the pinching of the needle, I immediately jerked back. I was bleeding a little from the needle mark. I don't think I want to do this right now. Trying heroin was too much for me. I could only bend so much, and I knew if I broke, I couldn't be mended anymore. I held my arm to my chest. David didn't care about my reaction. "Maybe another time," he said, and turned his back to walk to the kitchen, still holding the needle in his hand. With the loud music pounding in my head, I felt dizzy and exhausted. I must have drifted off. When I woke up, there wasn't anybody left in the living room. My phone showed 4 a.m. in the morning. There was trash everywhere, but no trace of anybody. Hoping that David and his friends were at the back of the house, I made my way there. The door was slightly open, and the sound of someone snoring provided a small sense of relief. I wasn't alone. David sat on one end of the large sofa, leaning to his left and snoring. On the floor nearby, a young man lay sleeping, his steady breaths visible. The coffee table was scattered with lighters, needles, and a bunch of other stuff. As I glanced around the room, my attention was drawn to a couch by the door. When I walked around it, the host of the party was sitting upright and wearing a white trash bag as a makeshift Halloween costume. His arm rested limply on the edge of the couch with a needle still stuck in it. His eyes were wide open, fixed on David. A wave of panic raged over me. I couldn't breathe, and I found myself running out the front door. When Anne arrived, I was sitting by the roadside, hiding in the shadow of a tree. She had kept me on the phone the entire time I was waiting for her to get there. I gave her the short version of what happened. She didn't make any comment over the phone, as if it wasn't a big deal. Instead, she told me a completely different story for distraction. She was getting ready to visit her parents over the weekend. Her grandmother would be in Tampa as well. Her father bought the ticket so she would get to see her granny. I'm worried she'll try to set me up with her best friend's grandson in Tampa. She knows I can't say no to her. Back then, she wasn't dating Jack yet. She even suggested that I join her over the weekend. I was thankful to her for the conversation, as I needed the distraction, something to numb myself, and I wanted to keep quiet so I wouldn't disturb or awaken anyone in the neighborhood. "Are you sure he was dead?" Anne asked, as soon as I got in her car. I sank into the seat, releasing a deep sigh. I buckled up in slow motion, hardly finding the strength to pull the belt around me. It was warm in the car. The familiar scent of the leather seats and the soft music playing made me calmer. Feeling a little better, I replied, "I'm pretty sure he was." His eyes were wide open. He didn't even flinch when I walked around to look at him and the needle. My voice was trembling, but I continued. The needle was stuck in his arm. She didn't make any comment for a few seconds. Then she sighed and finally spoke. "How about David and the other boy? Do you think they're okay?" She looked at me sideways for a second, still trying to keep her eyes on the road. Positive. David was snoring, and I saw the other one moving and breathing. She nodded and seemed lost in thought. "I'm sorry, Anne," I said. "I've been nothing but trouble for you from the first day we met." I felt embarrassed for the situation I had put myself in. She smiled at me. "Don't be ridiculous. I knew what I was getting myself into. If you weren't who you are, crazy and reckless, I probably wouldn't be alive today. Or I'd be a broken person. Only someone like you would stand up against two psycho-drunk men." Her face became serious again. "However, you need to pull yourself together, Lara. This craziness and recklessness are not serving you well anymore. You're losing control. I love you so much, and it's painful for me to see you crumbling like this," she said, looking at the road. I knew I was ruining my life. "You know what? I didn't want to say this to you before, but I think it's time for you to hear me out." She cleared her throat and took a deep breath, getting ready to break the truth to me. "The way David's been treating you isn't any different from those two men who were going to rape me that evening." She was looking ahead at the road. I could sense the agony in her voice as she mentioned that incident. It wasn't something she ever wanted to remember or talk about, but she continued anyway. "Those men obviously were screwed up. They saw me as a piece of meat for their entertainment, and I feel like this is how David sees you. He doesn't see you as a person with feelings or a future. He sees you as a piece of meat, and I can't blame him for that because he, too, is lost in his own screwed-up world. I don't think he sees himself as a human being either. He must have lost his senses long ago. Those two men that night didn't have any humanity in them or any feelings, and neither does David." She peeked sideways at me to see my reaction. I disagreed with her. "Those two psychos used force on you against your will," I said. "David has never forced me to do anything I didn't want to do. It was my choice to stay with him. Maybe it's me. I'm the one losing my humanity." I was at the lowest point in my life. Seeing my reality for the first time and realizing what kind of future I was heading for made me feel sick. I knew I was the only person responsible for my troubles. Nobody else. He saw your weakness. Anne raised her voice. You were vulnerable and he used it against you. He used force on you mentally. He forced alcohol and drugs on you, and he wanted to make you like himself. Ruined. She kept looking straight ahead to avoid my stare. I see your point, I said. I don't totally agree, but I understand. Don't worry. I know I need to clean up this mess. I won't see him again. Should we call the police? Anne asked, worried, but she probably knew my answer. No, I said. I don't want to be involved with this anymore. The boy's already dead, and I can't blame anybody for this. I don't want to get in trouble. I'm sure David would figure out I was the one who informed the police. I can't take any chances. He might give my name to them for revenge. Anne nodded her head. This won't be the first time we leave the crime scene without involving authorities, but hopefully it will be the last. She sighed. I never saw David again. He never showed up at school. He tried to call me a few times, but I never answered. How was David's parasite different from the one in the store? I asked Azure.
His parasite originated on Earth.
You're definitely staying on your ship by the lake tonight. You know that, right? I gave him a troubled look. I would have let you sleep on the sofa, but I can't do that to Anne. I trusted him. However, I couldn't bring myself to mention to Anne that he'd been around, and it wouldn't have been fair to her for me to sneak him in after the kids went to sleep without her knowing. My conscience wouldn't allow me to do such a thing. He cracked a laugh.
Yes, ma'am.
He teased. No, seriously. If you don't want me to worry myself to death tonight, and if you want to find me in my right mind tomorrow morning, I have to know you're close by.
I'm serious. I'll stay and be your guard dog tonight. I don't mind. It is my fault, and I have to take the consequences. You did warn me to pick my words wisely.
Okay, you shall continue then. I gestured with my hand to let him speak. You were saying that his parasite originated on Earth. Azure was right. He was my other half. I wasn't even embarrassed about my fear of the monsters under my bed. I had never felt like myself when I was around other men, and yet I was completely selfless when I was around Azure. He sighed and continued.
When it's time for humans to make the transition and cross over.
You mean when they die? I wanted to confirm.
Yes, when they die. Some are not ready to go through that transition. Death might come so suddenly for them that it may not even register. They may have unfinished business and don't want to check into the other side yet, or they may think they're so sinful they'll go to hell for their sins. There are many reasons those souls choose to stay on the earth without a physical body.
Ghosts! I was bewildered. You can't be serious. It was too much for me to handle.
You believe the other energy-sucking beings from other dimensions are real, but not the ghosts on Earth?
I also believe in a man who says he's an extraterrestrial. Do you think I'm normal in any way?
Not really. Anyway, believe it or not, there are ghosts, and they're all around. Some of them don't know they're ghosts, while some of them are well aware of it. But they're harmless. But some don't have good intentions, and they're the ones who know how to attach to and manipulate humans. They want to have a physical body to feel.
Don't they have a mechanism on the other side to prevent this from happening? I asked in shock. Aren't there supposed to be angels or guides? Why don't they do their job?
The free will of a soul should not be tampered with, and one can pass over only if one is ready. No other being can force it. This is also part of the learning experience.
I guess David made a good host, I said sadly, as he was an alcoholic and a drug addict and never respected his body.
He did.
Azure paused and lifted my chin, examining my face as if he wanted to put my missing pieces back together. He lightly touched my cheek.
We can continue another time if you prefer.
He suggested gently. No, go on, I can handle it, I said.
I could only see the parasite through your Akashic. I don't know what happened to it after you and David broke up, but they made a good team. His ghost didn't really change his personality, but made it a little worse for him. That is probably why they were attracted to each other. You know, like attracts like, because they vibrate at the same frequency.
It gave me a shiver to think that I had spent so many nights with David, and that, in fact, I was literally sleeping with a ghost, too. Though, thinking back, the real David didn't give me any pleasant thoughts either. Gosh, my life is a joke. It's a big fucking joke. I laughed at myself sarcastically. Would it count as a threesome on the nights I slept with him? I blurted out. I slept with a freaking ghost and a psychopath. I was beyond angry with myself. Azur pulled me closer to him and held me in his arms.
If it's going to make you feel any better, this happened in the past, and it shouldn't have any more power over you than a bad dream would. David loved you as much as he was capable of loving anyone or anything. You were the best thing that ever happened to him.
I sighed in misery. I wished burying the past would be that easy.
You accepted David for who he was, despite his shortcomings. You accepted him and loved him. He didn't know what love was before. Every single soul in this universe craves love, Lara. From the most advanced beings to the single-celled organisms in a raindrop, or from the most angelic ones to the most satanic ones. It is the fundamental truth of the universe, and it's what we're made of. Humans act as if they're not God anymore, that they're separated from the source. In truth, we're all God, not separated, but still part of it. We're only playing the roles of humans, ghosts, and other beings. David and his parasite were obviously into their roles more than many humans are. They felt the separation more than most because they had thicker walls. He learned what love is from you, and so did his parasite. If anything, you should be proud of yourself.
He squeezed my shoulder caringly.
Life is nothing but an odyssey, a long journey on which we deal with all kinds of obstacles. But in the end, we all go back home.
An odyssey, I repeated. I sat there in silence with my head on his shoulder for a while. Neither of us wanted to talk anymore.
I'd better get going.
He kissed me on my hair and stood up.
Anne and the kids should be here soon. You don't want them to see me, right?
I shook my head and felt guilty again. No, not tonight, I said. Are you seriously going to wait outside tonight?
Yes, I will if it's going to make you feel better.
I nodded, embarrassed. One more question. Did my father have anything attached to him?
No, he was all himself, and his ego.
I wish he had, I sighed. It would have explained a lot for me.
Good night, Lara.
He kissed me on my cheek.
I'll be outside if you need anything.
Chapter 7. Babysitting. Anne arrived with the two girls a little while after Azur left my apartment. I was overwhelmed and tired, but I tried not to show it to Anne, with a big smile plastered on my face. I'd had a huge cup of coffee so I could stay awake until the kids went to sleep. When I opened the door, Stacy, the 4-year-old, stormed into my apartment and enthusiastically hugged both of my legs. I kneeled down, trying not to lose my balance, and picked her up. When she reached my eye level, she held my face, squeezed my cheeks tightly, and gave me a slobbery kiss on my lips. This is delicious, I said, kissing her on the neck and squeezing her even tighter. She giggled loudly, trying to push my face away from her neck. Anne was still at the door holding the little one, Kate. She was about to turn 2. The little girl was sucking on a pacifier that masked half her face. She kept staring at me as if she were meeting me for the first time in her life with her huge blue eyes, which seemed to occupy the entire half of her face that the pacifier didn't cover. I put Stacy down, stepping forward to take Kate into my arms, but once she realized I wanted to pick her up, she turned and hid her face against her mom's shoulder. "Come on, you little princess. You can't hide from me." I tickled her chubby belly. She giggled but tried to bury herself in Anne's shoulder even more. She didn't seem to be thrilled about leaving her mom. "She barely had a nap this afternoon, and she's a little tired and cranky right now," Anne confessed, her eyes apologetic. "Don't worry, I saved all my energy for them today," I lied. Even white lies like this really bothered me. She was my best friend and the only person who felt like family in my life. I didn't want to betray her, but I didn't want her to worry about the kids or me either. I wanted her to be happy. It took us a good 5 minutes to convince Kate to separate from her mom and move into my arms. She couldn't resist any longer when I bribed her with strawberry ice cream and promised her I'd play hide and seek with her all night. Anne removed their rather big pink bag off her shoulder and put it on the floor. "You've got everything you need in this bag," she said. "Stacy's blanket, some snacks, diapers, a few toys, and DVDs. "A Mary Poppins bag," I nodded my head approvingly. "A Mary Poppins bag," Anne grinned. Stacy had already made herself at home. She was playing with her favorite toys, the only toys in my house, the Russian nesting dolls sitting by my TV stand. It was a set of wooden dolls she could place one inside the other. I had gotten it as a souvenir when my mom and I took a cruise to Alaska a year before she passed away. The dolls were popular in Alaska. Although the trip was during July and we visited only the southern ports, the air was still freezing cold. We didn't know Mom had cancer then, but she somehow had the urge to complete certain goals in her life that she had always wanted to do. Now that I look back, maybe she knew something was wrong with her. She was frustrated with Alaska's cold weather. "There must be lots of Russians in this place," she concluded when she saw the dolls in every single store display. "How smart of them," she said. "Oh, it's so cold in Russia. We're suffering. Let's move somewhere else. Let's go to America, and among all the American options, let's pick Alaska," she said jokingly. Alaska was beautiful, but being from Tampa, the cold weather was too much for us. "Jack's waiting for me in the car. I've made reservations at a Thai restaurant downtown. I've heard it's a good one," Anne said excitedly. "I've got to go. I'll call you first thing tomorrow morning." "Take your time as much as you want," I said. "Bye, Laura. I love you." She waved at me and hurried out the front door. "I love you too," I yelled after her. I was still fighting with myself about whether I should run after her and mention Azur. But I knew it wouldn't help her situation, and I wouldn't be able to tell her the whole truth anyway. When I returned to the living room, Kate was standing by the TV stand, staring at her sister while sucking on her pacifier. Finally, she decided to join Stacy. Stacy, on the other hand, seemed to be annoyed by her little sister's attempt to remove the dolls from their rightful place on the floor. Inevitably, snatching started, and crying followed. "Who wants to play hide and seek?" I asked to stop the squabble. We played hide and seek for a good 20 minutes. They kept hiding in the same place, right behind my L-shaped sectional sofa, and I had to act surprised each time I found them. Over and over, they laughed as hard as if it was their first time. "I'm hungry," Stacy said at last. She wasn't interested in playing anymore. "I thought you already had dinner with your mom," I questioned. "But I'm hungry for some snacks," she told me convincingly. "Let's go check out the kitchen and see what we have for you two little monsters," I said, walking with her to the kitchen. I didn't notice Kate was out of my sight. As soon as I realized she wasn't with us, I rushed back to the living room. She was already halfway into my TV cabinet, playing with my glass flower ornaments, which had been standing in a little glass vase. The TV cabinet was filled with accessories I had collected through my trips. They weren't valuable, but they were sentimental to me, as I had traveled mostly with my mom. When Kate saw me coming from the kitchen, she clumsily tried to put them back in the vase. The vase tilted and fell, with my glass flowers in it. It hit the hard floor and shattered. The small pieces scattered. I wasn't fast enough to get her away from the broken bits. She leaned down and picked up a piece. I don't know how these little kids could move so slowly and yet fast enough to get themselves into trouble. She held the broken piece in her hand for a few seconds before letting out a high-pitched scream. She slowly opened her palm and cried even harder when she saw blood. I rushed over to her in a panic, but fortunately the cut wasn't deep. I cleaned her hand and applied pressure with a cloth. The bleeding stopped, along with her crying. "Should we call your mom?" I asked, but I was actually talking to myself more than Kate. Stacy rolled up her pants and showed off the scar on her leg. "See, I fell on my knee from the seesaw, and my scar is deeper," she said, proud of herself. "I guess you girls are always getting yourselves in trouble, huh?" Seeing Stacy's scar was a relief. "I don't think we should bother your mom with this then." There wasn't any point in concerning her. Kate had already moved on, more interested in the strawberries on the kitchen counter. After 2 hours of playing, reading, eating snacks, and watching TV, the girls were exhausted. The queen bed in my guest room was big enough to hold both of them. I had bought the bed when we found out my mom had sarcoma, soft tissue cancer. She had to stay with me so I could take care of her and keep my job at the same time. We were hopeful then, but she ended up in the hospital 2 months later and never returned. I had pushed the bed all the way to the wall after the girls' last visit so they wouldn't fall off. I lay down between the two to prevent them from bothering each other until they went to sleep. I was sleepy and exhausted myself, and the next thing I knew, I was opening my eyes. I was disoriented, but both the girls were asleep. I dragged myself slowly to the edge of the bed and rushed to the living room to check the time. It was already 10:30 at night. I must have fallen asleep for 2 hours. I called Azur immediately. "I'm so sorry, I fell asleep with the girls," I apologized as soon as he picked up. I never doubted that he wouldn't keep his promise. I was sure he was outside, waiting for me by the lake for no apparent reason other than my fears so that I would feel better. He chuckled and didn't sound upset.
Don't worry. I wasn't expecting you to call me anyway. Kids' energy is always strong. You can't resist it.
What do you mean?
I knew you would fall asleep with them because it's easy to get in their energy field. They're always open and pure, and their will is always much stronger than adults.
Are you still outside?
Yes, I'm still outside.
Feeling guilty. You know what? I'm feeling perfectly fine now. You can leave if you want to, I suggested. But in truth, I wanted him to stay to make me feel more secure.
No, I'm fine. I don't have a better place to be right now. How did it go with the kids?
Aside from a little accident, I think it went fine. It's hard work. I don't know how Anne manages every day. They're so cute and I love them very much, but I don't think I'll ever want to have kids of my own.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
Azur answered in his typical casual way. Suddenly, eliminating my options really bothered me. Now that the words are out, does that mean that I'll never have kids? I said in concern. You said everything is energy. We create with our thoughts and seal it with our words.
It depends. Emotions play an important role. If you say it out of fear, meaning that having a child is something that scares you, I don't think the universe will take your suggestion seriously. It is designed to make you face your fears by matching your frequency so you can get over them. When you say something out of fear, you basically send out a request to make it happen.
I'm not terrified of having kids. I just think it's a lot of responsibility, and I don't think I'd be a good fit, I added uncomfortably.
We all learn from our mistakes. You won't know unless you have a kid of your own. You might have a lot to offer to a child. Children and parents choose each other anyway. They literally sign a contract based on their needs before they're born.
I'm having a hard time believing in the contract signing concept. I don't think I signed such a contract with my father. Even if I did, obviously, he didn't fulfill the contract terms.
You might be surprised. Besides, technically, parents are not really creating a new human or giving life to a new person. The soul is already there. Nobody is born, and nobody really dies. It is all part of the illusion. If you have a child someday, you'll help that soul to have another experience. That's all. You have had many lives in which you had children, and many in which you didn't. So whatever you choose will be fine.
Did you see it in my Akashic records? Did I sign a contract with anybody to become my child? I didn't know what I wanted to hear.
I can't tell you that. It would ruin all the excitement for you. Even if I say yes, it wouldn't mean that it would become your truth. The future is never written in solid rock. You can always change it.
He was right. It was best not to find out.
Having said that, I hope you're sincere about not having a child.
Why is that?
If you want to have a kid in this Earth reality, it would have to be with another man, and I don't think I could handle that well.
His voice lacked warmth and any emotion. I wished he were right next to me so I could read his face to see if his comment was serious. I'm not planning to have any kids with you or anybody else, I said hastily. I was really uncomfortable with where the discussion was going. I had known him less than 2 weeks anyway, and he was already telling me he didn't want to have any kids with me. It was humiliating.
Don't take me wrong. What I mean is I can't give you a child, at least not in this dimension. If I did, it would bind me to the third dimension, and I wouldn't be any help to you anymore.
I don't think I understand, and I don't need to understand. As I said before, I'm not planning to be a mother, at least not in this lifetime, I confirmed. I didn't care about having a child or not, but I was struck by his comment about the possibility of another man. I couldn't bring myself to think I could be with somebody else. The thought of it gave me pain. It hurt me that he could even consider the possibility of leaving me after all of our talks about me being his soulmate. Would you really let me be with another man? I asked. As soon as the question was out, I realized my insecurities were coming up again. I'm sorry, Azur. It was a silly question. I've only known you for a few days. I don't know what's happening to me. I tried to apologize. There was silence on the other side for a few seconds, and then I heard a sigh.
I love you, Lara. and I don't know how many times I have to tell you. We've known each other for billions of years, not for a few days. We were created from the same breath and were meant for each other. I know that. I'm sure of it.
He sighed again.
And deep inside, I know you feel it as well. But if someday, for any reason, you choose somebody else over me, I can't object to that. The universe is all about free will. Nobody can make you do things. It is all about choices.
He was frustrated. I could tell from the tone of his voice. I understand that, and I'm not going to choose anybody else, I exclaimed.
Then why are we even discussing this?
Because this is what humans do. We argue and we discuss stuff for no reason, mostly to satisfy our own insecurities.
I have a hard time understanding that.
I can teach you, I chuckled.
Yeah, good luck with that. I don't think I'm wired to understand such a concept.
Well, maybe that's the whole point of my being here, to help you figure out things you can't understand from the fifth-dimensional perspective.
Yes, it is exactly the reason. And I can't wait for you to ascend to the fifth so you can explain those things in my terms.
I kept silent because I didn't have a response. He made it sound so easy, but I couldn't comprehend the concept of a leap from the third dimension to the fifth, or even what that meant. Or I was doomed for another 10,000 years. He must have sensed my uneasiness on the subject, so he changed it.
Are you ready for tomorrow's trip?
What time are we planning to leave?
As early as possible, let's say 9 in the morning at the latest.
What if Anne doesn't pick up the kids that early? I wasn't sure if I was making up excuses and trying to get out of our deal, or simply telling him my concerns. After a short pause, he resumed.
I don't want to pressure you, Laura, but you need to do this sooner or later. Why don't you tell Anne about me? At least she'll know you have a date.
I will, I promised. I hate that I have to keep lying to her anyway. I just don't know what condition she'll be in tomorrow. What if things don't work out between her and Jack, and she needs someone to talk to? I can't ask her to grab the kids early and leave.
You're right. She may need you. The worst-case scenario is that we'll travel another day. But promise me something. That you'll cut all your cords tonight and you won't think about Anne or the kids or me or anything else. Everything will be all right. You need to get a good night's sleep. I still need your full attention tomorrow, regardless of our trip.
I could only say, promise.
Good night, Laura. I love you. You'll always be safe. I'll always be with you. Don't forget this.
And he hung up. I love you too, I said to the mobile phone I was holding, knowing he couldn't hear me anymore. The kids slept the entire night and were up by 6:30 in the morning. Amazingly, I was rested and didn't mind being up so early. I was excited about the day ahead. However, I was also feeling something else, a feeling I hadn't felt for many years. I had butterflies in my chest. Ever since I was a little kid, I had longed deeply to feel this way. I was genuinely happy, maybe for the first time in my life. "Who's ready for breakfast?" I asked. Both girls screamed back, "Me! Me!" jumping up and down on my bed and raising their hands. "The pancakes are on the way," I said excitedly. They followed me to the kitchen, but the smell coming from Kate suggested that they needed some cleaning before breakfast. After 20 minutes, the girls were settled at the kitchen table and waiting for their pancakes. My phone beeped when they were about to finish. It was a text from Anne. "Are you up?" "Yes, call me," I replied. The phone buzzed in my hand right away. "I knew you'd be awake. The girls are always up early, especially on a Sunday morning," she said sarcastically as soon as I picked up. "How come you're awake?" It wasn't a good sign that she was on the phone with me instead of being in bed with Jack. "I couldn't sleep well last night. Actually, I didn't sleep at all. Jack's sleeping." She sighed. I could sense the disappointment in her voice, but I still had a slight trace of hope that I could be wrong. "Please tell me last night was great, and you couldn't sleep because of the crazy sex you had with Jack all night." She chuckled. "You wish," she said. After a short pause, "I think I've messed it up, Laura," she continued. "I'll be there in 20 minutes to pick up the girls, and we'll talk. I need to tell you something as well." I was determined to mention Azur, but I wished she had been in a better mood. In less than 30 minutes, Anne arrived at my apartment. She appeared weary, her eyes showing signs of fatigue. It seemed like she had spent the whole night crying. Despite her condition, she mustered a warm smile to greet the girls. Kate, of course, dramatically showed her so-called big scar on her palm to her mom right away. I had the urge to explain to Anne remorsefully what had happened, but Anne was more concerned about my broken ornaments than her daughter's scar. She whispered an apology and promised me she would somehow replace them. I gave her a look to imply she was being ridiculous. "Did you have breakfast?" I knew the answer already. She didn't seem interested in eating anything. "I've had a cup of coffee. I'm not hungry." I was oblivious to her answer. "I'll make you pancakes, and I have some strawberries from yesterday." I put the girls' favorite DVD in to keep them busy and dragged Anne to the kitchen. "I'll flip the pancakes and you talk," I commanded. I knew we didn't have much time before the girls would want to move on to something else. "It's been a while since we've been on a date," Anne started, her voice having a deep sadness to it. My heart ached for her. I wished I had known about her troubles. I could have helped her more with the kids so she could have more quality time with her husband. She continued, unaware of my thoughts loaded with guilt. But this was different. I knew it wasn't going to be a romantic date. I was nervous. But he was uneasy, as if he was doing me a favor or doing chores for me. Maybe I was being paranoid. She shrugged. Her voice was trembling. We arrived at the restaurant, and the minute we were seated, he was on his phone checking his email. I was invisible to him. He didn't care. He didn't even look at me. I don't know what it is, whether we've become so comfortable around each other we don't need to talk because we already know all there is to know about each other, or whether he stopped loving and caring about me. She paused, hesitating to begin what she was about to say. "I still love him," she confessed at last, looking at me as if I might have an answer for her or a solution to her problem. I wished I did. I was never one to sugarcoat things or pretend to empathize for the sake of it. I believed in speaking my mind and seeing things as they were without rose-tinted glasses. Jack wasn't someone I particularly liked. He was charming and good-looking, but I felt he took advantage of Anne's love for him. He used her as a status symbol in college, and now she was his trophy wife. I doubted his love for her was genuine. It was always about fulfilling his own desires. Despite knowing her dislike for Chinese food, he once took her to a Chinese restaurant for her birthday because his friends preferred it. She always looked the other way, always found an excuse to forgive him. Their relationship had many ups and downs, but Jack's smooth talking always got him out of trouble. I was invariably honest with Anne about him. She knew I had never liked him, but I didn't have a clean history myself when it came to dating back then. Who was I to judge? However, the situation became even more apparent after the kids were born. Jack was nowhere to be seen. He was always busy with his work, business trips, and dinners, too tired to spend time with the kids. Anne was a single parent of 2 with only a little financial support, but I kept quiet. She didn't need my true opinion, which she had been exposed to many times over the years, but she needed my support on that morning. I kept my silence and listened patiently to her. She went on. So he preferred his phone over me. I should have stayed silent and calm, but I couldn't keep my frustration to myself anymore. I exploded. I literally threw a ball of anger at him within the first minute after we were seated at the table. I don't think he realized what I was so angry about. The date was an utter failure. I lost it. I started venting about his ignorance toward me, toward the girls, then how much I've sacrificed my life for my family, which was pathetic. I shouldn't have brought that up. After all, it was my decision to be a stay-at-home mom. She breathed deeply to keep herself from crying. I wished we were alone. I would have told her to cry to get it out of her system, but I was worried that the girls would walk in on us. I even asked him if he was having an affair. I'm telling you, I lost it. What did he say? He was furious. Of course, I didn't mention his phone to him, she smiled sarcastically. Then he accused me of having trust issues. I tried to calm down, tried to explain to him why I was upset and how I feel lonely. It gets really challenging sometimes to deal with the girls, and I receive no support from him. I told him that too. This is good. At least you've made yourself heard. Now he knows how you feel. I was done with the pancakes, but we stayed in the kitchen to be out of the kids' range of hearing. Don't be so sure. He kept defending himself, saying how busy he is since things are really challenging and competitive at work, and how hard he works to provide for his family. He even brought up our trip to San Francisco. He thinks I don't appreciate him enough. Maybe he's right. She sighed and took a bite of pancake. Her eyes filled with tears again, and I wasn't sure if talking was helping her. Please don't even go there. He's doing it again, laying a guilt trip on you. I was done keeping my opinion to myself. But he's right. Maybe I'm being selfish. No, you're not. I raised my voice, but I again lowered it, thinking of the kids. He needs to be around more for you and the kids. I understand he works hard, but he enjoys doing it. All he talks about is his work. It should be okay to miss a few business dinners or to spend one weekend with you instead of working. You aren't selfish. I was angry with Jack, but I was also angry with Anne for being so easily manipulated. She was already blaming herself for his flaws. You agreed with Jack, and you gave up your career to start a family. It was a big sacrifice on your part. You can't blame yourself for being a burden on him. He asked you to stay home, and it was your decision, but it was his too. It's not easy taking care of two kids. I stayed with them one night, and it was challenging. I don't think it's something I could do on a daily basis, I admitted. She smiled at my confession. She knew me well enough not to be offended by my sudden revelation. If anything, he should be grateful, I added. I asked him if he still loves me. He said yes, but I don't think he was sincere. We're so entangled with our daily lives, Lara. The kids, his work, the chores. I didn't realize it before, or I didn't want to admit it, but we're leading two separate lives. We're so disconnected. She sighed. I was awake all night with my thoughts. I kept wondering if there was any going back. I wish we could go back to how we used to be, but I don't think it's possible to make someone return your love again. No matter how much I disliked Jack, I wanted things to work out between them. They had two beautiful girls together, and Anne loved him very much. I had to find a silver lining. You may be overreacting a little, I said. I'll still keep my stance on him bullshitting about his work, but maybe he's stupid, and he doesn't know how to manage his time at work and is distracted at home for that reason. Anne laughed at my comment. However, the bottom line is that it's too early to reach a conclusion. You sound like you've already burned the bridge, but you didn't. You two haven't even had a decent conversation yet. I don't believe things between you two are too damaged. You need to give him another chance. I don't want to talk about this anymore. You said you had something to tell me? I wasn't expecting the sudden shift in the conversation, and it caught me off guard. I wasn't sure how to bring up my half-truth. Azur called me last night, I began. Before I continued, she opened her eyes wide, and her face had the image of a kid on Christmas morning right after opening her first gift. She let out a silent scream. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy for you, Lara. Where is he? Is he already here? I hope you didn't have to cancel a date because of me. No, don't worry, I lied. He'll be here today and he wants to see me. Where? When? She cried. You're not planning to get rid of him, right? She knew me so well, but she didn't know Azur. No, I'll meet with him today, but I don't know what we'll be doing, I said, which was the truth. I had no clue where he was taking me on his spaceship. I'll give him a call later. We haven't worked out the details yet. He's so gorgeous, and he seems to be very intuitive and nice. Please give him a chance, Anne pleaded. I knew it was a warning for me to behave myself. Arnis was also the most pleasant man I've ever met, she continued. Do you remember I was in tears when you two walked into the cafe at the beach? How could I ever forget? I had thought that Arnis was pulling another trick on Anne. Yeah. What was that all about? I asked. We never had the chance to talk about it, or more accurately, I never thought Anne wanted to talk about it, so I never brought it up. You know he has a girlfriend? She asked. Azur had mentioned that Arnis had commitments. I nodded. It was about him at first and how he was with his girlfriend. That brought up the subject of Jack and me. She struggled with her words as though she were trying to solve a puzzle. There was something so peculiar about him, so different as if he knew my troubles with my husband, and that was the reason he brought up the subject. He must be very intuitive, she said. They were intuitive, all right. I knew that Arnis could sense her troubles, though it was a shame that I wasn't aware of them. What happened? I asked. Their relationship is mostly long distance. They both travel a lot, I guess. I didn't ask for the details, but he was sure of himself and his girlfriend. He said no matter where they are, they're always connected, and he loves her dearly. Then he made me realize the reality of my relationship with Jack and how much distance there is between us, yet we live in the same house. He talked about unconditional love, being there for someone, not to get something in return, but because you love the person so much, you wouldn't know any other way. I could easily imagine Arnis explaining to Anne what unconditional love was. I'd had an excellent instructor myself since yesterday. You know, sometimes I feel like this life is nothing but an Odyssey, Anne continued. A what? Azur had used the exact term yesterday, and it was an unusual word choice. Hearing it again, this time from Anne, caught my attention. Odyssey, it means journey. I had to smile at her patronizing tone. I know what it means, but there's a story in Greek mythology behind the word, is there not? Anne had a huge interest in anything involving Greeks. She'd taken a mythology class when we were in college. I was in for a mini lecture. She seemed to be delighted to take my cue. It's from the ancient Greek poem, the Odyssey, the story of the warrior Odysseus and his decade-long epic journey to return home after the Trojan War. You know, the war in Troy with a wooden horse hiding soldiers? I smiled. I watched the movie with Brad Pitt. That's it, she smiled back. That was the Trojan War. She leaned back and looked me in the eye. I couldn't guess where her mind was traveling, but it obviously involved me. It never occurred to me before. Are you still having nightmares about drowning and a voice calling you out? You thought it was something to do with the sirens, mermaids, or mermen. I nodded. The last one I had was about a week before our San Francisco trip. I shrugged, wondering where she was going with her question. During his journey, Odysseus fought against the egocentric gods who kept setting obstacles along his way. It was Odysseus who sent the sirens to their death. His men resisted their seductive voices by tying themselves to the mast of their ship. The sailors blocked their ears, but Odysseus didn't. He knew if he listened to the sirens' magical voices and resisted, he'd be able to kill them. So, 10 years of an epic journey, huh? I said, mostly to myself. It dawned on me that Odysseus's battle was against the egocentric gods, but my battle was with my own ego. Somebody told me I've been here on Earth for 10,000 years. Maybe all this Odyssey talk is a sign. Maybe it's time for me to break the 10,000-year cycle and ignore the lure of the voices in my head, tricking me into deep water. What cycle? Who told you that? I waved off her curiosity as though the subject was meaningless to me. I had already said too much. Oh, it was a silly conversation with someone, and this man believed in reincarnation and told me that I was stuck on Earth for 10,000 years. I was glad Anne had other things on her mind and wouldn't question me further. She didn't even bother to make a joke about being stuck on Earth for 10,000 years. She absent-mindedly twirled her wedding ring around and around on her finger. Don't you think life is a journey with ups and downs, and we're simply making a big deal out of it? We should take our lessons and move on. My lesson is probably to stop pursuing Jack and skip to the next chapter of my life. She took a deep breath. You're right. We need to stop listening to the constant chatter in our heads. She was staring into space at something that wasn't there. Oh, I'm going crazy. Her eyes shifted to me suddenly, searching for answers that didn't exist. She didn't wait for my input. She was on her feet already. I'd better get going. Stacy has a soccer game today at 10. I wasn't planning on taking her, hoping I could be with Jack a little longer this morning. Oh well, I need a distraction now, and I don't want to stay home while he's around, she said. It's only 8:30, I objected. But she had already headed to the living room where the girls were watching TV and told them they were leaving. They were gone within a few minutes. The house felt empty after they left. The TV was on, and I switched the channel to local news. Anne's sadness was still lingering in the air. I couldn't imagine her going home to someone she's not comfortable with. I picked up the phone and called Azur. Stay tuned for Chapter 8 and more incredible artwork. Please remember to like our videos and subscribe to our channel.